So far, it appears that my Devil May Cry 5 response to the microtransactions has gone pretty favorable towards my stance. There is a large agreement that people are upset over the most mundane, non-essential addition being added to this experience. We've waited 10 years for this game, so I believe Capcom cannot afford another PR disaster equivalent to DMC Devil May Cry. They have been making strides to reassure the uncompromising nature of the fanbase that the micros in DMC5 is literally the same practice as DMC4 SE. Naturally, people have the tendency to misconstrue the message on top of giving 5 billion different excuses. I'm here to break down the general complaints I have been saying about micros in DMC5 in my last comments section. I understand this video feels like deja vu and hardcore fans will understand this notion, however I want to reiterate my point one last time for the hearing impaired, aka Angry Joe fans, Jim Sterling fans, and people who admire that Metal Gear guy who just regurgitates videos about loot boxes and microtransactions all day without understanding the real value of a video game, the real fun factor. We all know what's up. Let's start with the obvious. Why did I call out Angry Joe, Young Yeah, and Jim Sterling? I have no personal vendetta against these YouTubers. Actually, I don't even hate them. I was even subscribed to Young Yeah and Angry Joe for a little bit. As time went on, I got more apathetic to the way they conducted opinions, even to the point where I felt like they were being insincere if they were fighting for the gamers, but they're either giving positive attention to games that had microtransactions, or they're defending SJWs like Joe did for Anita Sarkeesian. Let's not bullshit people, right? We know Angry Joe is in this for the money. Many big time gaming YouTubers are. They focus on the entertainment value of gamer reviews for the money over being a hardcore gamer. A hardcore gamer wouldn't go out of their way to rile up the Kingdom Hearts fandom just because Joe is too lazy to play the HD remasters and he said he's jumping right into Kingdom Hearts 3, which will be a big item when it comes out in January, so you know where his priorities lie. I don't know much about Jim Sterling other than the fact that he praised the reboot and DMC4 SE. I found that to be a bit hilarious since both games had micros and he didn't have an issue giving DMC4 SE an 8 out of 10 while saying that DMC5 is going to be a bad game with the same microtransaction policy in place. You can see where the confusion arises. When that statement is made, his claim holds no weight in the case of DMC4 SE. Young Yeah's channel just boxed itself in. If he wasn't known as the Metal Gear Solid guy, he certainly moved on to being the loot box guy. It's a noble effort, except due to his fanaticism with Kojima, I think he will let Kojima off the hook in some instances, especially if Death Stranding had loot boxes. He never complained about the mother base coins having micros in MGS5. I searched his channel. And I didn't find anything about that. He complained about them being in Survive, but not MGS5, so what's the difference? There's still microtransactions in that game, and he supported a game with microtransactions. This is where we get to the good shit. So other comments mentioned I was in favor of micros. I never said I was in favor of micros. I said it depends on the transaction, how it's handled to get any sort of rise out of me. If people watch the original video, I stated that they should wake me up for this war when Capcom obliterates all the content in the game via microtransactions. So until that theory is proven that endings, cutscenes, missions, and characters are locked behind a particular transaction, then I don't see this as much of an issue. I think people are just fear-mongering, scared that a company who reassured them constantly will betray them. I think it's natural to have those sentiments after the debacle with EA and the loot boxes, but the situation is not comparable to that. DMC5's demo already gives you a large surplus of orbs that you can utilize for free if you want to unlock everything in a single run, and they allowed that opportunity. Then why should I be upset at this? It's like complaining about cosmetics in multiplayer. It's just there. You don't have to buy it if you don't want to. I also saw people arguing about this being a pay-to-win model. I don't think those people understand how Devil May Cry works. All of the moves require application, time, and learning how vital these techniques are in each situation. A casual gamer isn't going to be able to pay and win and mash his way to victory just because one character has a hefty moveset. He has to learn. That's assuming that the standard boss doesn't tear that person to ribbons. Everything has a pattern, a means of coordination with how they attack and operate. For example, you could be given all the tools for the job of an electrician, but it won't mean shit if you don't have the experience to fix a fuse box. I also saw people complaining about red orbs, saying they could be used to buy continues so the player can just spam revives. Doesn't that add to Insuno's notion that player choice is literally an option? With giving people the ability to purchase red orbs is something that we want to give people as an option. If they want to save time and they want to get all the stuff at once, those people can do that. Now, if you suck that much at DMC that you need multiple revives, then you probably should realize you're almost as bad as DSP by that point, doing such a terrible disservice to yourself to scrub out extra lives. However, it's not like it isn't an option to use the in-game currency until you actually learn how those mechanics work for each new obstacle to overcome. Hardcore players like myself would rather spend those orbs on more fleshed out tactics. If a scrub dies, they could go for the revive because they have that choice. If hardcore players wants to learn the fastest of the game, they might be perfectly content with starting a stage over. Some DMC players work in meticulous and somewhat sadistic ways, and the difference in meta is like night and day in most situations. Hell, even Nero was created to appeal to a more casual friendly market, with the Devilbringer making some insane enemy encounters child's play. You can constantly die and buy up gold orbs, but you have to ask yourself, are you learning in the process with all these deaths? This does not make you a good DMC player if you fail to learn. I also saw the argument of microtransactions not being in DMC4 originally, and that this was going to be the same premise with DMC5 as Shadow of War and Battlefront 2. This is a pretty loaded statement, so I'm going to try to get this over with fast. Number one, yeah, they weren't in DMC4 vanilla, but that game had an entire host of issues. For starters, it was unfinished. The Dante levels in Hell were ultimately scrapped. So are you going to say that having no microtransactions and an unfinished product is worth making an argument over? Hell to the no. Number 2, Shadow of War had it where you had to grind for the last orc captain to complete the game. Battlefront 2 had issues with locked legacy characters being an intrusive system for the longest time. Until we see locked characters in DMC5, until we see locked endings, then this is erroneous. I would not defend this at all if it happened. I'd be just as angry as you. Since I'm over here chilling as usual, I'm not making any bogus claims before the evidence is revealed to us. That's usually what rational gamers do. If I'm wrong, I'll eat crow. If I'm right, well, too bad, I'm buying the game. The philosophy of give them an inch and they take a mile only goes so far when gamers dictate how the industry is ran with their money. Just don't buy any of the fucking micros and loot boxes and maybe companies will listen. When we make games like Overwatch popular, buying into massive amounts of loot boxes, then another company will want to follow suit off their success. When things sell, like the Halo 5 rec cards, when people buy GTA 5 shark cards, other companies just want to follow because they want that money. That's a company mentality. Like I said, it could go for better, where you're not forced to buy micros, or it could go for worse, where your game is shredded into ribbons and resold to you, and that is something I don't want. But I don't care about optional microtransactions. I don't care about suits. I don't care about jackets, and I definitely never cared about red orbs in DMC4 SE. It was never in my face. I could get orbs normally. So what is the issue here? Unless they bork the in-game store, which they would be stupid to do, that would be like a fight money situation like Street Fighter V, where it's so hard to grind for in-game currency. If they do something like that, then you have an argument. Until they do it, if the store is like DMC4 SE, where you could obtain a lot of Proud Souls, a lot of red orbs, just by playing on higher difficulties, just by playing normally, then what is the issue? There is none. This is a non-issue. Also, I think people don't know how the store works for Devil May Cry. You see, one guy was complaining about spamming continues, but you know the balancing that Insuno mentioned, the store prices go up when you buy something. So yeah, more orbs going into one item means that it costs a lot more the more you keep doing it. So it gets a little bit harder to get those gold orbs. It gets a little bit harder when you're maxed out to a certain limit, and the gold orbs, they have a cap to them, so you can't go over a certain amount. Going back to the original statement of how there's micros for better or for worse, these still are very two distinct situations no matter how you slice it. Hey, if Jim Sterling supported DMC Devil May Cry, then that game had micros no matter which way you slice it about the cosmetics. This is why I don't believe many fan babies in the comments section when they fake outrage after their favorite reviewer gives a hot take. The second they wire everything down to "I'm not buying the game because Joe said so," these people are probably the same people who played Persona 5, and that was a Game of the Year contender for many people, and other people who will probably play AAA releases and indies with micros hidden in the system, all for the sake of compromise, all for the sake of their favorite reviewer giving these games a perfect score later down the line. If it's one thing I learned during my time on this planet, is that people will change their tune rather quickly over basic word of mouth. It just happens. We're people, we have to accept it. So I don't want to see people buy Red Dead 2 if that's the case. I don't want to see people buy The Last of Us Part 2 because you know, especially the factions multiplayer is going to have microtransactions. So keep that same energy if you use the word boycott, not buying, etc. But you won't, because if Joe gives a glaring review, if someone else, Jim, Young, etc., if they give a glowing review, you're gonna buy it because that's the hypocrite you are, and you will be officially labeled as a fraud to me. The last argument here is that people are saying, why didn't DMC5 use cheat codes instead? This is actually a fair point I kind of agree with. It's better to have the freedom of no micros versus having them in to begin with. However, that being said, Capcom doesn't want to let that casual audience slide. They know what people want. That's why they're doing something like this. So I believe this was a publisher decision, and let me reiterate, this is a business practice that does not affect me as a hardcore DMC fan. It is not required for anything special that I can't get already, so if that's the point, I don't need it. They could have used cheat codes, but it's still similar to the same player choice that Insuno described. If a person wanted to use cheats, or if a person wanted all the moves out of the box, it's still the same premise. The only difference is that you have to pay a transaction to get an orb boost versus putting in an input, or you could just play the game normally and it's going to be tailored like DMC4 SE as proposed, and unlock all the things that you need gradually during player progression. Remember, player choice. This won't really bother anyone in the long run if Capcom plays their cards right. I took the fight to loot boxes and bad business practices before on this channel, so no one can say I never spoke out against them. I just find micros here to be very non-intrusive. I also find them to be non-intrusive as cosmetics are, and until there's a reason to legitimately hate the fucking awesomeness of Devil May Cry 5, I will be buying the game. You can't avoid the inevitable pandering to casualization sometimes. It just happens. Just don't buy the micros. It doesn't hinder your enjoyment, and I don't care about all these agendas. I care about getting a good game. This is Renegade Operative signing off, and hopefully this situation is over with. Something tells me it might not be, but I said my final piece on this. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and get back to me soon. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Later.